All right, well, let's move to a company that is on your conviction buy list, a company that you're going to be adding to the portfolio, and that's Broadcom. So let's walk through the thesis on why now and what has you excited about Broadcom.
Yeah, and the simplest way to think about Broadcom, as we've shared in past episodes, is if Tesla, I should say, or sorry, Tesla, got Tesla on the brain after the last segment. If NVIDIA is kind of the Apple of the data center world where they're really trying to sell an integrated solution, Broadcom's a little bit more of your Windows. They're going to work with these hyperscalers. They are the primary alternative to NVIDIA in making the actual chips to run your AI models on, and also networking, which, as I've described, I think there's going to be a lot more spend put into that market. And Broadcom's actually seeing higher growth in kind of their AI centric networking than they are from their AI chips. And they've got a great toehold there. So I feel like if I'm talking about some of the increasing estimates earlier in this episode for kind of data center spend, if I'm owning NVIDIA, I really want to own kind of their primary competitor. So when we look at Broadcom, what are the need to know stats around this company? It's worth $857 billion. It's very large. If you go into Yahoo Finance, you're going to be very turned off looking at this company because you're going to see it's trading for 157 times earnings. The reality is not as bad as that looks. They're going to do an adjusted $30 billion in profit next year, putting them out about 28 times. Very similar valuation to NVIDIA. So, Broadcom, hey, again, if I needed to critique myself, I should have probably put this in the initial buy basket. We've definitely lost. I think it's up 20% since we will have initially discussed starting this portfolio. Those are some lost gains for a company I've always thought was kind of a core AI holding. But again, if you like the background, the single thing that matters around the growth in the AI market, I think Broadcom is a company that, as these hyperscalers, and when we use that word, we're talking about Microsoft and Google and Amazon, if they are spending still a lot more on NVIDIA, they almost have to hedge their bets on not being completely reliant on NVIDIA. And the primary way to do that is working with Broadcom because they are the primary alternative. So I like Broadcom here. I think the valuation is not as high as it looks. I think the management, Broadcom in a way, is kind of like almost a private equity roll up of a ton of companies. I think they are led by someone who's been, his track record speaks for itself, being able to add in companies that provide a lot of growth to the company. So I think if you're looking at kind of a core holding in AI, Broadcom has to be there. I think it's a great cornerstone to continue adding to the portfolio. And we'll start at 3% or $15,000. I probably would have even done a little bit more if it wasn't so hot recently. But again, if we see some sell-offs in the market, it gives us an opportunity to continue adding to this position, because I think Broadcom for an AI portfolio could be, a 5% or larger position.
Yeah, the stock has really had an incredible run. We just talked about Tesla. Tesla is included in the Mag 7 household names. Everyone says it's the Mag 7. Those are the companies that's carrying everything, even though hasn't really been true the last couple of months. Mag 7 has been kind of flat. The rest of the market has done quite well. But you look at Broadcom. Broadcom is bigger on a market cap basis than Tesla now. It arguably should maybe be a new member of the Mag 7. Maybe that will become a media talking point. Not that that's going to matter to the stock, but this is a monster company that is massive. So you talk about NVIDIA as kind of a competitor. Are they kind of frenemies? Like they kind of work together, but they're competing in some areas. How should we think about those two companies going at each other? Is that something you're worried about, or is it they both kind of win as the space grows and they work together enough that it's not going to be, entirely cutthroat?
Yeah. I think they're the two best positioned companies. Some people could argue for AMD. There's some frenemy aspects to them. Like I said, NVIDIA doesn't want to work with anyone. NVIDIA sees the size of this market and they want it all, right? And Broadcom's the biggest blocker to basically getting all. But there are models of their newest kind of all-in-one systems. They're putting out these Blackwell systems that will use Broadcom networking, for example. I think the biggest thing that I said earlier in the dynamic that investors out there need to understand is if you are a hyperscaler and all of a sudden a huge portion of your cost structure is only going to NVIDIA, these companies, cloud businesses, are worth trillions of dollars, coming towards being trillions of dollars. You cannot basically be just a front for one company. It is a strategic imperative that you can continue paying NVIDIA, but you need to try building out some other lanes that you control more. And Broadcom is the primary way to do that. So that's the relationship I think exists. NVIDIA will continue pulling in the majority of revenue. But again, we're talking about $500 billion building from close to nothing very quickly, that you will, I believe, have multiple winners in this market. And as a side point, last podcast, we had talked about a growing need for inference in some of these models. I believe that actually will push some more incremental spend towards Broadcom. So this is where we're being strategic. I'm watching some events that have been happening in the past month, and it's kind of building out a little bit of my conviction in them as a stock play. So I think you can own Broadcom. They trade under the AVGO ticker. You can own Broadcom, you can own NVIDIA, and win with both.
Yeah, it almost makes me feel a little bit better. You have these massive companies. I think there was the report. Was it true that NVIDIA was being, quote, investigated or looked at by, FTC? I remember that came out, and then it was refuted of, no, they're not actually. What was your take on that? And then I'll circle back to my other point.
Yeah, I think it came out that they weren't being, whatever the formal investigation is, that had not begun. But if you're a big tech company, you just need to assume the FTC is after you. That's the current environment that we're in. This isn't even a political statement. That's just reality. There's a reason you're seeing no real acquisitions. I mean, Amazon's acquisition for iRobot got blocked. I mean, are you kidding me? Like, iRobot's having to lay off a third of their staff. Why is that ever blocked? It's completely ridiculous, and it's a facet. I don't want to be political. It's just, you need to understand this if you are investing in these stocks right now.
Right. But in terms of NVIDIA being so large, it's going to draw a lot of eyeballs. Maybe it makes you feel a little bit better that Broadcom is also very large and they're kind of competing. There's a little bit of competition in the market. Versus if it was just NVIDIA, you got to imagine there's, going to be even more attention, more heat on that. Not that there isn't heat, but it almost makes me feel a little bit better that there's multiple players in this space that maybe gives them each a little bit more freedom to continue to grow, maybe try to do acquisitions. Again, we talked about Broadcom's. If you go pull up, I was looking this morning at Broadcom's corporate history. It's just a game of Pac-Man, of just eating more Pac-Man and becoming bigger and bigger. They have a very, acquisitive history. And you would imagine that might continue, but again, you need kind of the competitive dynamics to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, that would be a little bit of a threat to Broadcom. No investment's perfect. And the fact that they might have blockers on this kind of acquisitive nature, and they're also getting so big, how many targets are left? Like maybe buying part of Intel's business, maybe buying Qualcomm. There's just not a lot of targets left. But I think the kind of tailwinds at their back from AI supersede those risks to the company. And I think they have put together a very compelling package. They are the only company that can match NVIDIA with the breadth of their vision around kind of the AI market. So, that's why we're looking at them. Another smaller alternative in the space too is Marvell, which also does custom chips, has a lot of interconnect business around networking. So that's a company that we'll probably look at. It hasn't risen as much recently, but there's a few different players in this market. It's definitely, as we talked about before, NVIDIA gets 95% of the media attention, but there's a lot of ways to get invested in. And there's, especially as you get down beyond just GPUs and into kind of the networking layer, there's a lot of ways to get your cut of this growth.
All right. So that was Broadcom. Again, just a very quick recap of the entire portfolio now. NVIDIA, Synopsys, Coherent, Taiwan Semi, Credo, and now Broadcom is our sixth. And that's still less than 20% allocated. So we have many more purchases to come in these companies, I'm sure, and also new ones that we'll be bringing to the podcast.